Good evening, everybody. As I, Nick, Pennsylvania, back from the wilds of the greater Harrisburg, Pennsylvania region. The long week, and I am here, of course, as I am quite frequently, with my good friend Brendan Bond. Good evening, Brendan.
Good evening, Nick.
And we have a beautiful day. It was really hot and muggy, even as early as my waking time. And some storms rolled through. Thankfully, we were not hit because there's been some flooding out here, but the wind's up and it's become a very nice evening. But we're going to forgo all of that and we're going to travel eastward back to Devonshire. And you've got another tale from southwest England. What is it about? No, and I mean this earnestly.
Yeah.
What is it about Southwest England?
Well, it's wild because it's,
or I should say Southwest Britain, because it's not England there.
Precisely, right, yeah. But no, it's just interesting. I mentioned this the other week when we did the Morgwar. I just keep finding stories, and I haven't even got to the two main ones yet. There's just so much weird stuff in the area, and it's just funny because there just keeps being more weird stuff that reminds me of other weird stuff, and it just kind of like keeps snowballing. So I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, and just I'm going to keep finding things here, I think.
And I need to correct myself. I guess Devonshire is part of England. I know Scotland is up here, obviously. We know Ireland, Northern Ireland. I'm never very comfortable knowing the geographic boundaries of Wales.
Right.
And I've never really been very clear on the Cornwall question. So, my apologies.
No, it's interesting because where we're talking about today is Dartmoor specifically. And again, like I said, we haven't even got to like the big things with this area yet. We're eventually going to talk about some other more related folklore. I really want to do something on like alien big cat stories that you see out of this area, and Bodmin and places like that, just because I think they're fascinating. Because like there's a lot of people who think like, oh, these are spectral cats, but other people are like, no, these are just escaped animals or released animals. There's also the famous, Arthur Conan Doyle story set in the area, The Hounds of Baskerville. There's just a lot of really good folklore and stories in the area. But now today's story takes place in a very specific area. So this takes place along a road called B3212, which is between Postbridge and Dartmoor. And me and Nick were talking before we started recording. There is like a very unique road naming convention in England that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me when I first started looking into it. It makes even less sense now. But in the Pittsburgh area, we have a kind of a haphazard belt system that isn't a whole lot better.
No. And we were chatting about this. So we live not far from the red belt, but there's an orange belt, there's a blue belt. My understanding was prior to the U.S. highway system being more thoroughly developed in the years immediately after the Second World War, this was one of our bombing, like if you need, because we were a target for bombing for obvious reasons that are not really, they're kind of negated at this point. These were the exit plans, but they are not like a true beltway in the sense that they weren't really designed. It wasn't very committed. And it really, I think I described it as a confederacy of various roads that kind of circle around the greater metropolitan region. But I also said that in the state of Washington, there are also some very silly street names. And I think the example I have sent books to a place called something like 34th West Street East or something like that. And so conventions are interesting, but leave it at that. And also Cornwall is immediately, it's that little jut out position immediately southeast of the region of which we speak. I had to satisfy that question.
No, but so But so just I wanted to be specific about the road we were talking about because folks, I know we have some listeners over in England. They probably already know where I'm going with this. Speaking of that road, so what we're going to be talking about tonight is the legend of the hairy hands of Dartmoor, which was just too good of a name for me to pass up. And this is another one of those stories that seems like it is really well entrenched in folklore and popular culture over there in England that I really don't think I'd ever heard of before.
I certainly have not. And again, solid name.
It's a good name.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
a
intrigued. And as ever, when you bring these things up and I don't know anything about them, unless you specifically request it, I do
yeah,
not go, sneaking about getting pre information. So
yeah.
I'm curious to hear the tale.
So the tale here, again, it's an interesting one. There's a lot of theories out there on. There's a lot of stories. So we're going to go through some of the highlights tonight, because frankly, I think it's interesting, and I think that it is unique in a world of so much folklore that I know we talk a lot of folklore where it's like here's a thing in one area, and it catches our interest because it sounds like a thing somewhere else,
Right. Or the
which is
kind of the universal ones like the
yes.
Yeti, Bigfoot,
Right. There's
you know.
there's some archetypal stuff happening, that seems to be indicative of just what naturally happens with the human condition. Um, this is one of the ones in the opposite end of the spectrum where it's just like, what in the world is going on here? The skeptics will have one answer and believers will have another, and we're gonna kind of try and go down the middle here, and we'll let everyone think, kind of come up with what they think, and we'll get to some of the prominent theories and maybe some of our own theories. Generally speaking, this goes back to the early 1900s, starting in about 1910. And when we say hairy hands, that's what we mean. We mean hairy hands. So I think that maybe the best way to get into this, introduce everyone to this tale, is to read. I believe this is the first at least major news article around the unseen hands that caused a death. So like this is serious stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump in and read the story. So this comes from the Daily Mail,
Pretty
Monday, October.
prominent paper.
Right. Yeah. So this isn't like a tabloid. This
Right.
is
This is like the equivalent of Washington Post or
right.
somebody.
Yeah. So it's at least has some provenance in that sense. And this specifically comes from October 17th of 1921. What is the mystery of the unseen hands on the Postbridge, Two Bridge Road in East Devon? On one stretch of this road, a little distance out of the Dartmoor village of Postbridge, three curious accidents have occurred since the end of March. These accidents were described in a veiled manner in an article called The Unseen Hands, which appeared in the Daily Mail last Friday. In that article, Mr. Gifford, described how in each case the vehicle unaccountably swerved to the side of the road. On the first occasion, this strange swerving resulted in the death of a doctor who was on a motorcycle. On the second, a motor coach was affected and several passengers were thrown out. On the third, an officer friend of Mr. Gifford, riding a motorcycle, stated that he actually felt two large, muscular, hairy hands cover his own and force him to the side of the road in spite of his resistance. As a result of this apparently enforced turning movement, the young man was hurt and his bicycle was damaged. The doctor in the first instance was Dr. E. H. Hebley, medical officer of Princetown Prison. Were his hands similarly turned against his will by the large unseen hands which so nearly killed the young officer? It is impossible to answer the question, but the fact that he shouted to his two children passengers in the sidecar immediately before the accident, telling them to jump, as there was something wrong, shows he was aware of the danger. Yesterday, the author of the article, who is interested in psychic matters, told a Daily Mail reporter that the two explanations of the matter were the interference of an elemental or nature spirit, or of the earthbound spirit of some such person as a murderer. Author's note, also see elementals. As far as I know, however, There is no record of a murder having occurred near the spot, he said. I do not think that the officer to whom the last accident occurred knew of the fact that two similar accidents had taken place on the same spot. The accidents happened within a few hundred yards of each other. I should say, the place where the accidents occurred is near the gates of Archton, the house of Sir Courtney Walter Bennett, formerly British Consul General at New York. That's kind of like the first big intro to the story. So there's kind of like these three different accidents that it's
Yeah.
kind of reporting. So
Well,
before I get a little
they
more into
do
that,
allude
what are your
to
thoughts?
another earlier article though.
Mm-hmm. That one I wasn't able to find.
Okay.
I'm sure. Again, I'm sure it exists. Wasn't able to find it.
Okay.
It is referenced a few other places because again, these are so old. They're kind of hard to put together sometimes.
Sure.
But yeah, so there's at least these three incidents that took place in short order in 1921 between what appears to be March and August. The children of that first incident where they said their father told them to jump from the sidecar and everything,
Yes.
they were luckily they were unhurt, but they kept that story up their whole lives, it seems like. That they reference that's what happened because the father was killed, which is
Oh
awful.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be memorable. Does it cite how old they were? Maybe I missed that in the telling.
It just says young daughters. So
Okay.
hard to tell. I mean, you'd think they'd
But the other
have to be small enough that the two of them could fit in a sidecar in 1921. You
right.
know.
Now one thing I want to say though is
Hmm.
that he says jump because something, and maybe he said something's wrong, or because he sensed something's wrong, because he sensed danger.
Hmm.
I wonder if it wasn't just some other malfunction. Is there any sort of suggestion in the article or in additional readings that it was looked at, the bike itself, for any, like, like when we have air
Right.
incidents, there's an investigation because of all the hoopla. I don't know how big it was at the time
Hmm.
outside of this article.
Right.
But because of this conversations, I don't know if anybody ever took a mechanical inspection of the vehicle to say, well, here's what's wrong. It was running real hot, and he was telling that, and he was afraid. I don't know, one thing or
Right.
another.
No, I think that's a great line of thought of like, was it just something mechanical ahead of time? I didn't see anything that talked about any kind of like forensic evidence. They just refer to, this gentleman, age 51, receiving an extensive fracture to the skull, uh, and a breaking of the portion of the motorcycle while he was driving. So now in that you could read as, and again, that's the quote, the breaking of a portion of a motorcycle. So that does make it kind of sound like maybe there could have been a mechanical issue ahead of time, or was it, did he hit this bridge or the tree next to the bridge or anything like that? But I think that's an interesting line of questioning that I don't see brought up anywhere in any of these articles that I've been looking at. The kids do mention the motorcycle started shaking ahead of time, and again, they were in the sidecar. Like you see people that get that, what do they call it, like that death wobble or whatever when
Well,
riding motorcycles.
and skateboarding
That
too.
yeah,
When
skateboarding,
there's the
same
speed
thing.
wobble,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
That like once that starts happening, like yeah, you can probably hold on a little bit, but like it's
You have to learn how to get out of it. And I've
yeah.
never, I've ridden dirt bikes a couple times. It's not my thing. I've never
Hmm.
actually ridden a proper motorcycle.
Right.
But I know there's some counterintuitive things with skateboarding when you get speed wobble, and that is lean into it and everything, you know.
Right. Right.
But if you could very, or I would say it's akin to if you hydroplane or you start fishtailing
Yeah,
on the road.
you have to learn to steer into it, and it's
Right.
yeah.
It's all of those things, and some of it sounds counterintuitive. Look where when you're driving, you should always look to where you want to be going and not where what's in front of you or anywhere else, because
Right.
but yeah, I mean, the curiouser story to me is
Out
the
of
one
those
where
three.
somebody says he feels these
So
hands.
yeah, so let me read a quote from that guy because he didn't die. The third accident didn't result in a death. This person again was an army officer. So and this is in August 26th of 1921. So he is quoted as saying, "It was not my fault, believe it or not. Something drove me off the road. A pair of hairy hands closed over mine. I felt them as plainly as ever as I felt anything in my life. Large, muscular, hairy hands. I fought them for all it was worth, but they were too strong for me. Strong for me. They forced the machine into the turf at the edge of the road, and I knew no more until I came to myself, lying a few feet away on my face on the turf."
Now, he never says he sees them in any
No,
way.
he says he feels them. That's why I
Right.
don't know if he like does he feel the hair? Like is that like that sounds like let's say hypothetically,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if your hands are on a bike, you're holding
And lots of vibration.
yeah, lots of vibrations and everything. If someone put hands on top of your hands, you'd be feeling their palms, obviously. You wouldn't know that they are in fact hairy unless they were fully hair covered, right? Like like if you don't see them, how would you know that they're hairy?
Well, there's that. I don't know if somebody was wearing gloves at the time. You see a lot of, in the 20s, there's the whole kit where you've got gloves on and whatnot.
Right,
I
right.
don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Because the other thing I was thinking when you started talking there is about you're gripping, you're riding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long this person had been riding for. You got vibrations. Your hand starts to go to sleep or anything like that. Is there anything like that which could explain that feeling as well?
If it could have just been some like phantom, I mean phantom in the not in the paranormal sense, but in the like
Right.
you're just confused because you're feeling something you're not used to feeling. In that article, it references a carriage crash. I couldn't find the original article that mentioned the that carriage crash, but that happened apparently in June by how it's referenced, but no like real details about that one. One of the things that I want to bring up kind of early on here is there like these stories do continue after the summer of 1921, but they just get weirder and weirder. Now is where starts to sound like some of our other stories where we're like, this stuff is all over the place, you know.
Well, is it
But
all over the place in this building? Because I mean, we're talking about, you said these started in March and they were done by June or July, was it?
August, yeah,
August.
August
So we're
of
talking about
21.
like a 6 month span.
Yeah.
And does it just stop abruptly, or does a
So
trail of articles just sort of dry up?
So it seems like a lot of the articles, at least the Daily Mail ones that I was able to find like in their archive, again with just these, but again, like I said, like the article I was just reading, refer like they call it the unseen hands. Searching through some of these archives and using words that are that like common is tough. um, so it's very possible there are like articles that come out after this, but at this point it seems like a lot of it is just picking up on the same ones and reiterating these stories. So like this is what we see with a lot of folklore, right? Where something becomes like established, there's a little bit of a sensational element to it, and it kind of becomes part of like the cultural, zeitgeist at that point, right?
Sure.
So what ends up happening is, from what I can tell, is the next big story that at least catches any kind of real news coverage is in what year is this? In 1924. So three years later. So I'm just going to kind of read a quote from this here. So this folklorist, Theo Brown, staying in a caravan about a half mile from B3212. So this is our same road. She tells about a story about seeing a hand in outside her caravan. So
A
what she
singular
says,
hand.
just a singular hand.
And I wonder
Uh,
where it stops. Does it stop at the wrist?
I'm going to tell you here.
Oh,
So,
great.
so she wakes up from a dead sleep, feeling something very kind of like menacing, and not sure why. And we've all been there where you wake up and you're like something is off, kind of not sure what. So you can put
Usually
yourself
right
in.
before Charlie Horse starts.
Oh God, it's the worst. So hopefully, well, luckily for Theo, it wasn't a Charlie horse. It was maybe something else. But so she looks up near the little window at the end of the caravan and she says, I saw something moving. As I stared, I saw it was the fingers and palm of a very large hand with long hair on the joints and on the back of it, clawing its way up to the top of the window, which was a little open. I knew it wished to do harm to me and my husband who was sleeping below. I knew that the owner of the hand hated us and wished us harm. I knew it was no ordinary hand and that no blow or shot would have any power over it. Almost unconsciously, I made the sign of the cross and I prayed very much that we might be kept safe. At once, the hand slowly sank down and out of sight, and I knew the danger was gone. I did say a thankful prayer and fell at once into a peaceful sleep. We stayed in that spot for several weeks, but never felt the evil influence again near the caravan. But I did not feel happy in some places not far off, and would not for anything have walked alone on the moors or at night around our caravan.
Well, there's a lot of conjecture on this woman's part.
There's a
Like,
lot going on in this one.
one,
Yeah.
reading it doesn't say too much about the description other than being very
Right.
large and such. It makes me think of a tarantula,
Mm-hmm.
but she's reading a lot into the intent,
The
the hand's
intent.
intent,
Oh,
and
for sure.
that's one thing. Of course, obviously, it's no ordinary hand. My God, it's detached,
Right.
and it seems to have gained sentience and some sort of
Yeah.
a visage that's
Mm-hmm.
expressing all of this intent
Right.
that she's able to
Yeah.
read into.
She's
But
she's really taking a lot of
so
that in an
I don't
intuitive
think she's
nature.
going too far in her description of it as being not normal, not a typical hand. But
Yeah.
the further conjecture that really rubs me wrong is she knew that she wouldn't be able to like shoot it. It wouldn't do any good.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess there might be something to her thinking there, because obviously the hand's been excised from a body, which is usually what it takes to control and animate a human
Right.
hand,
Yeah. There's obviously some
and yet
obvious
it's still
necromancy.
going. So probably
Right.
a gun wouldn't do anything. But again, I think, because this being somebody's tarantula that's gotten this, these caravan people and their tarantulas.
It's almost what it sounds like. Now, some of the parts of that I think that are kind of interesting, though. And again, this is in 1924. We do see a few kind of like what we now see as like common tropes with dealing with, some weirder elements, some that are not mundane. Because like obviously, like the Occam's razor of this is that it's some creeper trying to look into their, the caravan window. But that's not the road that she's taking. So if we stay on that same high, strange, weird road. So we have the idea of someone praying in the presence of something and it shirking. Whether that is something that is just, demonic or, anti-Catholic in this case, probably, or anti, probably anti-Catholic. Like, what do you think that says? Or do you think there's anything to that?
I don't think I mean, I don't know the Catholic aspect of it, but because did it say that
She said she did the sign of the cross, and I assume if someone's saying I did the sign of the cross, they're probably Catholic. But
is that exclusive to Catholicism?
Does the Anglican? No, I don't think so. Does the Anglican Church do it in England?
I believe they do.
Hold on, we're gonna
Sidebar.
You know what they do. So
yeah, I was gonna say.
I thought that was just Catholic. So
no.
It's not. So just we'll just say anti-Abrahamic religion entity.
There you go.
In general.
All right. So it makes
yeah.
me think of one. I think that it's just there are some people that are going to do that sort of thing.
Just something they believe in.
Out, oh my God, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
But I also think of classic. I think of vampires. I think of all that. You're supposed to ward off. So yeah. I don't think much. I don't think that that's an exceptional gesture.
But I think that kind of leads to the supernatural element of it, at least if that's the case. Then we also have her saying that after she says a thankful prayer, fell at once into a peaceful sleep. Now that sounds like some of both Fae related phenomena, and we see that with alien abductions. And things like that, where people get weirded out by stuff, and they should not be falling right back asleep, but they absolutely do.
Yeah, I think that's ill-advised. I will say that what I think happened this disembodied hand
Yeah,
of hair or tarantula, which, that's what it makes me think of. Saw this woman praying and clearly saw it was outnumbered by one and didn't
at
like the
least
odds.
just playing
She's
the
got
odds.
two hands and she's using them both.
And between her and her husband, we can assume there's probably four hands, 4 on 1. Not great odds. So that's one of the other kind of weirder stories that gets a lot of traction whenever you kind of look up and research the hairy hands of Dartmoor. Now, one of the other ones I thought was interesting. I'm going to go ahead and read that is much more modern. This one takes place in the 90s. So this is a gentleman who is speaking about his uncle who lived in the area. So I'm just going to read this one verbatim. I live on the road that goes towards Princetown, but I have heard it happen to people here elsewhere in Devon. My uncle was working for a builder's late on site when he got held up and came home a different way, and he had to go down that same road. And this is him speaking of our B3212. He was driving a small van and said it was very dark, and at first he felt like the van was being followed or someone was watching him. And he just felt spooked in general. And anyway, he thinks he saw someone on the side of the road, but then realized there was no one there. So it sounds like the guy's having a few like phantom experiences. So then this person goes on to say he went further down the road and he felt his van was grabbed by a force and he could not keep the steering wheel straight, so that he was going side to side on the road. He is a builder and a big strong man, and he was trying to turn the wheel as hard as he could, but couldn't in any way. Then he felt something on the wheel and looked down, and his eyes were just off the road then, and he saw a pair of large hands covered in hair on the wheel, grabbing it and pushing it the other way. His van went up on the verge and banged hard into the grass moor and almost wound up hitting a tree, but luckily it stopped. Just then the hands disappeared, but he was really scared, and luckily someone came up the road a few minutes later behind him in another car and stopped to make sure he was all right and was able to take him up the road to get help. He was all right, but he was in shock. My uncle still swears blind that this happened to him, and he is not someone who admits to things like this, and that was 20 years ago. So this was posted in the 90s, but so it would have taken place in the 70s, I guess. Excuse me.
But that's still a really interesting story. And here's
Mm-hmm.
here's one of the things I'm grappling with, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting story, pretty well told. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Now, if I take that just at face value, where do I go with this? How do we inspect this thing further to make any sort of judgment
Mm-hmm.
about it? Because I'm assuming that quite a number of people drive this road regularly.
Mm-hmm.
There's regular people, plus if we have a smattering of incidents now over the better part of 80 years, what are we to take from that?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a very low percentage. So one, what do we make of it all? But also the other thing, and this is what I grapple with, is sometimes people just make stories up, and not of whole cloth because there's a precedence here, but to
Right.
write another chapter in an ongoing thing so that it doesn't drift away, it doesn't fade away. There's this interesting thing here. Oh, you know what? My uncle was
Mm-hmm.
there and had a very crazy story. He's not the sort to make this sort of thing up.
Right.
So that's where I come from a
And
lot of the time. Is
there are
sometimes people do just make stuff up.
right. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of stories in this area about these hands, and they all sound very similar. They're all over there's a lot of books out there that talk about them, but these are just kind of some of the main ones.
Okay.
But like you're saying, a lot of them, it seems like it's like, oh yeah, it's that same folklore where it's like, oh, my cousin, was coming through the area and he had this weird little thing happen.
Yeah, no one's following up with the cousin or the uncle. What I want to
Right.
know though is because honestly, I've giggled about some of the methods, or more
Mm-hmm.
to that. I've giggled about some of the kit, like modern ghost
Right.
hunters go
Right.
about. But I do think there is a sincere cadre of those people that are very much looking for evidence and the way
Totally.
that
Yeah.
they feel like they're able to achieve that. What I'm wondering is how would you set about trying to prove this?
Right.
Because one, it's not, even though there's dozens and dozens over a road that's been here for at least 100
Well over
years.
100 years. Yeah.
Right. And not beyond that, it's such a low percentage because of that regular travel and 100-year time span, and that these hands are sometimes visible. That's the other thing. Are these two separate incidents because the invisible hands, plural,
Mm-hmm.
were by their definition not visible but only felt? The caravan hand was singular and
Right.
seen.
Right. Those are two different things, right?
Right.
Yeah. But they're
You
reported
know,
in the same
let me just
breath,
say
you know.
this. Let me just say this. You have me at sentient hand that gives off some sort of vibe that makes you read into its intentions, milling about visibly. You lose me when you say that that sentient hand with some sort of vibe that can give off its intentions in a readable way is also able to, at will, and sometimes with a friend, make itself invisible. That's now it's just getting a little silly. But
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I like the uniqueness of
It's
the
unique.
stories. But I mean,
Yeah.
when I think of that caravan one in particular, I say, is this somebody, half
Trying to
awake,
yeah.
low light situation, seeing a tarantula? That's out of the norm.
Certainly out of the norm for
And
that
if
area.
I could see how someone would look at that and be like, "Oh, that looks like a really hairy hand."
Hmm.
I don't know what to make of this.
Again, this goes into there's a lot of theories and people have been looking for explanations outside of just the like again, people are making stuff up one for a long time. So I have an article here that's from later in the year in 1921. So this is in September.
And around the original
Nope,
rash
October
of
23rd.
incidents.
October 23rd.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Either way,
Yeah.
still
So a
right around the original
little later.
rash.
And this is from a Beatrice Chase. Venton House, Wincombe on the Moor is where she's from. So, and this was posted in Western Morning News. Sir, in reference to the various press reports on this subject, and this is talking about the accidents on the moors, I may mention that I happened to see one of these extraordinary swerves in the same place at 3:30 p.m. on September 15th. We were motoring up from two bridges and saw a motor coach full of passengers ahead of us on the road coming towards us, while several hundred yards distant, the coach suddenly swerved into the roadside almost at a right angle. It seemed for a few seconds impossible either that it should not turn over or that the passengers did not get thrown out. It was a long, straight piece of road with no curves and no other traffic, and the coach was being slowly and carefully driven. When we drove up to the place, we examined the tire marks on the road, which were almost right angular. I never saw such a thing. May I suggest that these things may be due to magnetic rocks, which there are many on Dartmoor. This extraordinary season may have increased or altered magnetic currents. It would appear to have some connection with metal, and the steering wheel or handlebars would act as conductors, and the electric shock might account for the strange sensation described by the young officer of the previous article. In the interest of the public, it would be nice if someone with the requisite instruments could test that road from the top of Merripit Hill to Archton.
Okay, so I like where this person's going.
I
Like
like where their head's
again,
at. Yeah.
I do too. And I don't know, like magnets, how do they work?
Yeah.
I don't know enough to be able to say, well, this is baloney. My initial reaction, though, would be, you know, again, 1921 seems to be when this rash of things
Yeah.
starts happening. So, what is it about magnetic properties that makes, the bottom line is, hey, I'm putting an idea out here, but we need to have somebody who can actually put this to the test.
Right. At least asking for that.
Right. I like where this person's coming from. I support him.
Yeah. So, but what this kind of got me thinking of is something that is brought up in a lot of like the skeptical articles around this, which there are many. Actually, The Skeptic, the UK-based magazine, has a few write-ups on this that are really good. One of the things that gets brought up a lot is, road construction in our day and age is not that great. It also wasn't very good back then. So it didn't take a lot for if a road, even if it was built right, can still deteriorate really rapidly. And I think everyone out there who drives currently has been in situations where you hit like weird ruts in the road that kind of like force your tires into like certain like grooves almost.
Yes.
Whether it's usually when they're doing like temporary construction and things like that.
Well, and there's one stretch of road
Mm-hmm.
immediately to the north of myself. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to say so that you know where we're at.
Yeah.
North of Playthings.
Okay. Oh, that's straight
By
away.
that,
Yeah.
yeah. By that little deli there
Yeah.
on that,
Mm-hmm.
by the blinker. Or no, I
Yep.
guess that's a red light. As you are coming towards that, heading north,
Mm-hmm.
when they last repaved it a few years ago, the press that they used to make the rumble, it
Yeah.
came out and into the lane a little bit for like 10
Okay.
yards.
Yeah.
And every time I drive there, I hit that little rumble thing and I
Yeah.
think there's a problem.
Right.
There's not
There's not,
with
but
my car at least. But yeah, so there's even a silly thing like that.
totally. So like that might be like the Occam's razor for this is just that like is the substrata of this road because it's on the moors just particularly susceptible to like wear under the road, which will create weird grooves that you might not see when you're standing there, but when you're driving at speed, it feels like it's pulling your steering wheel.
Right. Now, it doesn't explain the hairy
Doesn't explain the
feeling of
hairy
the one
hands,
person, the
but
sensation. But
yeah,
that could just be nerves. That could be a lot of different things. It could
right.
be something remembered that wasn't there. It could be some sort of
Well,
explanation that they're trying to gather. I don't know.
well, again, this is something I probably should have looked up, but like in 1921 in England, how many people were like driving a lot? These people are obviously traveling and everything, but it's like, it's not like cars have been around for all these people's full lives, you
No.
know? So like I wonder how much of that plays into the fact that just like, there's just a level of amateur driving that isn't used to dealing with these kind of weird situations that we wouldn't think twice about necessarily. People that have been driving for their whole lives,
All good
you
questions.
know. So that's like the Occam's razor for me. Like mentioned in that first article, there is people that talk about the prison nearby, and that gets brought up a lot. That like maybe these hairy hands are from a some sort of discarnate or upset spirit, which would maybe make sense if it once went after this prison doctor. But why would it continue going after people? That seems a little strange. But again, we're trying to ascribe motivation to a disembodied spirit, which isn't always the most useful thing. But
Oh, it's not even the disembodied spirits, it's just bits of it.
right, it's just literally just the hands, So people bring up that a lot. People just bring up because it's hairy. People talk about possible Bigfoot phenomena. Now there are Bigfoot sightings around Dartmoor, which might line up with the one caravan story that we talked about, but at least a physical flesh and blood Bigfoot doesn't quite line up with disembodied hands trying to wreck motorcycles and cars that are driving down the road
Well,
necessarily.
and again, let's not try to shoehorn Bigfoot into everything because,
Challenge accepted,
right.
according to the internet.
Well,
So,
what I'm going to say to that, and
yeah.
I've said this before, remember we had that conversation where I talked about, hey, here are several large, most of them land animals that have only been taxonomized and everything by the
Yeah.
Western sciences within the last century. We had
Hmm.
that conversation. So
Yeah.
there's definitely the slim to middling prospect that there is a real such creature, but it's certainly not everywhere. And okay, granted, I am no expert on the British Isles,
Yeah.
but where are you going to place such a thing? We're talking about a place on a much smaller scale.
Right.
than your classic
Less places
Pacific
to
North.
hide, you know.
Right. It's a lot of the forests were denuded century ago.
Right.
I just come on now. This
Yeah,
seems
if you're talking flesh and blood creature, this doesn't line up
I don't know any
by
other
any.
kind, but you
Right.
know.
Well, I mean, flesh and blood versus like like the paranormal, more high strange version of Bigfoot.
Right.
Um,
I knew what you meant, but
yeah,
still.
but I know what you're saying too, and that's the thing is I don't think because it comes up all the time, but I feel like it just comes up because of the word hairy, and people are like, oh, we're talking about spooky stuff, so therefore Bigfoot.
Right. It has
Um,
hair
right,
and hands.
yeah,
This is
which
like one of those
yeah,
I loved in philosophy
yeah,
and rhetoric, making logical proofs.
oh, I love them too.
Because
Yeah,
they can be correct but inaccurate. And
yep,
this is like, okay, Bigfoot is hairy. Bigfoot has hands.
therefore
Therefore, hairy hands is Bigfoot.
is Bigfoot, right? And it's so yeah, that one's a bit of a stretch. Now, a lot of people do just attribute this to like the general weirdness of the area, like we kind of alluded to at the top of the show. There's a lot of just ghost stories in the area. There's a lot of kind of like fae and elemental energy. Like they even mentioned elementals in that original Daily Mail
Yes, they did
article.
with a footnote.
So right, so like maybe there's something to that, and that's something that I would have to look into more to like understand like what they're kind of referencing. But it's an interesting smattering of phenomena and stories. Again, these hairy hands come up everywhere in folklore in the area. Like I said, they're in basically every book about the area. There's a hairy hands section. But as someone who has spent at least a few times doing some serious driving in Ireland, which is not England, obviously. But I imagine some of these back roads through the moors are very similar to some of the back roads around, the Ring of Kerry and up near, Galway and
Yeah.
Donegal. Um,
Rolling hills and
yeah,
grasslands sort of feel.
and boy, like the road,
Narrow
yeah,
roads.
in general, the roads are terrifying and people drive like maniacs. That's my experience. People just drive. The roads are not good, and people drive way too fast for how
See,
bad the roads are.
I'm in
Um,
favor of more narrow roads because I feel like that forces people to slow
you would
down
hope, you would
and
hope,
it
but that's
makes things safer.
you would hope that is
There does
not
seem to
from my
be some,
experience. Yeah.
no,
Not from my
well,
experience. It's
either way.
nuts. It's nuts. It's a great. It's. I think you should be correct, but that's. It's. But so what I'm saying is, I think that like maybe there is like just because the roads are so narrow and everything that I wonder if like here, if you go off the road 5 feet, like you're completely. Let's say you're completely off the road,
Yes,
but all four of your wheels are off the road
you're dead.
over there you're like yeah you're like off the cliff in some places or you're in a wall like it's
Yeah,
just
I
they
imagine the walls would be a lot more of
right
a factor.
they just like don't have the berms like we have over here in a lot of
Right.
these again in a lot of these back road areas like most of the metro roads are perfectly modern and normal obviously if it's anything like my experience in Ireland it's like you can see yourself like oh yeah if you're going down like a dark road that you're not familiar with and like you hit some weird ruts and of this story of the hairy hands, yeah, it's the first place your brain's gonna go, And I think that probably keeps the story going, like you were saying. Like everyone has an uncle or a cousin that's,
Hmm.
had a run in with these hairy hands.
And they're
So
Harry Hendersons.
and the Harry Hendersons, right? And so yeah, I just think I think it's an interesting story because we don't have a lot of parallels to this one. This one
No,
is
I
very unique in
agree.
that sense.
I agree, and
So
I think I said something to that effect. Again, I think there's a little bit of silliness going on here
a
with
little
it,
bit
but
maybe.
at the same time, it sparks some good conversation. It makes me think of some things,
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I would love to go to this road in this between these two towns and everything and see it for myself.
like a
That would.
Geiger counter, and
Oh, I'd be out there. Yeah, the guy, all the accoutrement of testing and everything. Really, no, you should bring a surveyor. Is what you should bring. You should have someone. That's
yes.
what you should bring. So that's
Well, and
probably.
again, if you have a test in mind and what you would bring, you're going to the picnic and you're going to bring along, how would people tell us about this this experiment?
Yes, if you have an experiment you'd like to run with us, you can find us as always on YouTube and Instagram at the Ghost Furnace Podcast, or you can send us an email at the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com.